Good morning. That's not our thing. Hello.
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 Good morning and welcome to MC Podcast number 14. My co-host today is Kyle Vosburgh. So Kyle, welcome to the studio. Thanks for joining us. And again, kind of just remind us of what you do here at MC.
Yeah, well, it's good to be here. I think I'm almost a regular now. So a regular on the podcast and a partial superstar on the YouTube videos. So, but no, it's good to be here. And, like I've said in the past, my job here is related to agronomy and all things agronomy and the hybrid lineup and helping to build that. So
Good. And so we work pretty close together.
Yep.
You evaluate hybrids based on their agronomic characteristics. You're part of that whole process. I do. I evaluate hybrids based on their nutritional performance. And so then we kind of come together and bring those two parts to make a whole.
Yep.
And that's just part of what we do. I appreciate you joining me this morning. I will have to say, though, there is one disappointment you have showed me here lately. We went to Kansas with some of the marketing guys. So on your recommendation, we stopped at a certain barbecue place in Kansas City, expecting some out-of-this-world barbecue. I told the waiter that I was from Texas. He automatically pointed to the brisket and burnt ends plate, and I will have to tell you, I was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like it was unedible.
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 Yeah.
Like
uneditable.
Like,
would have been like they could have taken it back
yeah.
and changed it and made it a better barbecue. So
Well, you could have. I could have edited it,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
I mean, I knew
Yeah.
how to make this better barbecue. So I did want to express my frustrations with
Yeah.
you on that. But growing up Central Texas, it's a different style barbecue.
Yep.
And so going to Kansas City, I just expected. I knew it wasn't going to be Smoky Moe's Leander, Texas barbecue. I knew that going in, and of course, it just wasn't.
Yeah.
When the waiter told me that they only smoke it for 6 hours, no, I was like, nope, you don't have enough smoke.
Not long enough. Yeah.
No, not long enough.
And I think he led you the wrong way. Like I said, I thought the spare ribs was their key to success.
Okay.
But it was a little bit nicer. It was like I've said, there are two different kinds of barbecue. It seems like nowadays, especially with how popular barbecue's gotten, you either have the hole in the wall gas station. I would probably not eat here if I wasn't like fully engaged in barbecue, and then you have the places that are trying to establish a little higher end barbecue, and I think that's kind of where it falls under. And it's good, but we've had a lot better barbecue out of this office than we have at some of the restaurants we've stopped at. But
yeah, and so my plan is to someday take all of you northern folks on a road trip through Texas and get you some real barbecue.
Yep.
And then you guys will know why I'm such a barbecue snob.
Exactly. And then when I'm hungry halfway there and I get grumpy, you can stop at Whataburger.
At Whataburger.
So,
yeah, exactly. Whataburger barbecue. I mean, that's a full week for me.
And I've actually my last 3 years, I've had serious agronomy training and then also serious barbecue training, both probably at the same level.
Yeah.
And I think my barbecue tastes have actually are not as much Kansas City style as I thought. I'm not a big actual Southeast fan really either.
Yeah.
There's a place that we stop at in Chattanooga that we really like. I actually tend to like the Southeast sides a little bit better.
Yes.
A little less fried food down there, a little bit more vinegar-based barbecue down there. I actually have really gravitated towards the places in the Midwest and St. Louis. I mean, I think those are two of the best ones we stop at.
Yeah, and that's because you haven't been to Texas yet.
Exactly.
So there we go. There we go. So that's it. That's all. I'm dropping it there.
All right.
I'm dropping it there.
Yep.
So, all right. So on the agronomy side, Kyle, there are several things with the weather, the way that it's been, and so diseases. We're at a point now where maybe corn's not quite showing disease yet, but what diseases do you think we kind of need to be looking for this year? What have you seen in the past? What is your idea that this year's kind of setting up for?
Yeah. So in the past, and especially in the areas where we seem to be prevalent, the dairy markets and whatnot of Wisconsin and the northern states throughout the Midwest, I think northern gray and northern leaf blight, and then gray leaf spot as well. Seem to always be two that guys are worried about. It's one they're both extremely common. Guys tend to see them pretty often. Depending on your area and whatnot, they can be a little bit more extreme. We see it a lot out in Pennsylvania where you have the valleys and stuff. And but it's one of those things in the silage market. I don't think it's as big of an issue as it is in the grain market when you're talking about leaf disease drying down a plant, prematurely towards grain.
Okay.
Especially if you're talking, if you're starting to see gray and northern post pollination, heading into silage chopping. I mean, unless it flips a switch, it usually doesn't seem to be too much of an issue. But in the past 2 years especially, the first year I was really, in agronomy and research and development, it wasn't as much of an issue moving north. But southern rust has become a serious issue the past 2 years.
Okay.
Mind you, there's apparently two reasons what I have been reading and talking to people in the industry about. One is perfect environmental temperatures. Hot days, kind of balmy, more moist, wet nights, which we really haven't had right now. It's still pretty early. But then also, because we've had such warm temperatures over the winter, the bacteria and whatnot, the disease is actually overwintering farther north than it has before. Usually it overwinters pretty far south, and then weather patterns and whatnot move it up north. And so guys in like Kansas and in this part of the heartland start to see it usually about end of June through July into August. And last year there were sightings of southern rust right about 64, which is here, that basically crosses east to west right through Illinois.
Yeah.
We were seeing it like the second week of June, which is extremely early, third week of June. And southern rust can be pretty debilitating if it hits early enough.
So what do we do about that?
So there's a couple different things. Obviously, fungicide application can always help. A pre-pollination fungicide cannot hurt if you feel that that's where it's at. I've always kind of, and there's guys who will talk back and forth about it, but anytime during pollination, a fungicide is not a proper application time, especially because a lot of that stuff is oil based, and anytime you get oil on tassels and things like that and silks, you're prohibiting or stopping a plant from properly pollinating. So if you're coming up to pollination, or if you're coming up to half tassel, half silk or whatnot, maybe talking to your agronomist or whoever's helping you run your cropping plan about maybe using a fungicide if you see southern rust, or if you're starting to see just some early signs of things too. I know last year we saw some stalk rot in Minnesota that seemed to like really hammer them after pollination. I guess it wasn't one of those things that was seen early, and there wasn't a lot to be done at that point. But maybe talking about some stuff like that, and then also obviously crop rotation is one of the better things that you can do. Maybe using a soybean, in the next year, if that's possible. It's not always possible in the dairy industry. So things like that. And tillage can sometimes help a little bit too, which we'll talk about tillage today. But that can also, I think, a crop rotation is a better option, non-chemical wise than would be to do tillage.
Okay. So then my next question is: are there some hybrids that are probably more susceptible to some of those diseases than others?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we need to kind of be watching out for that, and your seed guy should be able to say, okay, this one is more susceptible, less susceptible. And one of those catchphrases in that we'll hear in the industry is responds well to fungicide.
Yep.
So what exactly does responds well to fungicide mean?
So respond well to fungicide usually means that it might have a parent that shows some susceptibility to a leaf disease. And that happens throughout the industry. The thing is a lot of times you'll have a parent line that when you make crosses and hybrids, it seems to show a little less resistance to things like northern and gray and things like that. Sometimes Goss's wilt will get thrown in there as well. But the thing is it performs so well when it does finish.
Yeah.
And these aren't, and mind you, these aren't inbreds or hybrids that people are pushing that are just going to absolutely fall apart. Or that they don't have any, back end yield, or they don't have any intactness, as a lot of guys say. It's just that they need a little bit more babying than some of your other hybrids. I mean, there are some workhorse hybrids that you can plant and do your normal herbicide and maybe a fungicide application, some insecticide, things like that, whatever you have to do, and you just let them fly.
Yeah.
But there are just a couple other hybrids. There are some in our lineup that feed extremely well that you just have to do a little bit extra babying.
Yeah. One in particular that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
If you think it's going to get leaf disease, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you need to go ahead and spray right
Yeah.
then. Yeah, don't wait. And so we know that there are those hybrids out there. So with this, and I know that at first you were talking more along the lines of, with silage sometimes we don't have to worry, but in Wisconsin this past year we did see some leaf disease affecting some yield
Yep.
and especially some quality.
Yep.
And so in like I said, especially in those more susceptible type hybrids that we had. In fact, I know that we kind of did a little feeding trial, and we had the hybrid that was highly susceptible to leaf disease, and then we had a really pretty healthy hybrid, and I can tell you overall that hybrid that is more susceptible usually feeds better than most anything in our lineup. Well, because it did get early leaf disease, and because they didn't get to harvest it quite on time, the hybrid that tends to have more health and more late season health, that hybrid actually fed better this year.
Yep.
Okay, and so we kind of need to do that, but if we think about it, maybe even grain or even silage, what kind of yield losses do you think that we can expect if we were just say, oh, I'm not going to spray fungicide, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to baby these hybrids? I mean, what kind of end problems can that cause?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's obviously a case by case basis. The thing with leaf disease that we've noticed here at Master's Choice and with the guys, especially Kevin and I working in agronomy, is there are oftentimes it's kind of like a switch being flipped. I mean, you'll go to a field and see that it's starting to set in. You'll see leaf disease really starting to become, what you think is going to be an issue, and you can come back 3, 4, 5 days later, and I mean, you could have basically burn down, or it looks like it's firing up, is what a lot of guys will say. And it is very case by case. And I guess the two biggest issues that the leaf disease causes, one being, as we said, it'll affect quality and yield, because anytime a plant stops photosynthesis, which is what leaf disease does, you're going to run into those problems. And number two, I think the yield loss comes more from the harvest timing issue, because your harvest timing becomes off. The moisture in the plant and grain is completely mismatched. You want the grain and plant to dry down, at their proper timing. And if you have a plant that's drying down but a grain that hasn't finished, it's all a mess. I mean, you get into a really bad spot. And that's why, especially in silage, because moisture and things like that are so important to fermentation and being in silo and things like that. That's why if you see it early in silage, you really need to be on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Need to be spraying that. Need to be thinking about that. Need to be watching that harvest window a little bit closer.
Yeah.
So for sure. So you mentioned earlier that we were going to talk a little bit about tillage today, and so we kind of have these different camps in the U.S. and in the farming industry. We have these camps: tillage, no-till, and then some guys try to ride the fence. Well, I limit my tillage, right? You know, and so
minimal till,
minimal till,
Yeah.
and which really makes nobody happy, right?
Yeah.
Or either side, you're just kind of stuck there in the middle. Is what I really mean by that. But talk through that for a little bit with us. Just talk through us the pros, the cons, the goods, the bads, the uglies about no-till, conventional tillage, all of those things, and just definitely just express kind of your opinion on these things.
Yeah. So no-till kind of came from the environmental side. There have been a lot of studies about soil erosion and soil loss and how that affects U.S. farmers, or global farmers actually. Where is our soil going? The thing is it's running off. It's it's entering our lakes and our streams and our ponds and things like that. That's where soil is going to. And I think agriculture has grasped it in a couple different ways as well, with weed control, with some other measures and things like that. There's a simplicity to no-till, and that's kind of where we're moving forward. It's the fact that if we're not tilling, if we're not turning the ground over constantly, then we're not losing soil. I've heard some, I don't exactly remember the numbers, but I've heard some pretty astronomical numbers of the amount of inches of soil you could actually lose in conventional tilling methods. But I think it's kind of becoming, I think it was more of an area by area basis. I think a lot of areas grasped it, and there were some areas that said, no, we're going to I mean, Michael Lake is a perfect example. Great guy, works here. I mean, I've become really good friends with him. But he is from an area of the country in central Illinois where everyone tills.
Yeah.
Everyone turns the ground over. There's not one farm up there that probably doesn't own a chisel plow or something. I mean, every single year the ground gets turned over. I mean, they might run a crop rotation. That's very common, because of the row cropping lifestyle there. But to talk no-till to guys up there, I mean, you'll get laughed off a farm, and that's kind of the thing. That's the way they've always done it.
Yeah,
And I don't think
when
they've
you
bought
have
into it.
6 feet of topsoil,
Exactly.
it
Good
makes,
tomato growing weather.
Yeah, exactly.
The topsoil joke never gets old.
Yeah,
But,
never. So, we could see that. So,
Yep.
But what are the pros and the cons? When a guy says I'm going no-till, I'm doing it to save soil. What other things is he using no-till foil for?
So, depending on what way you go into no-till, like if you have a cover crop that you're mowing down or you're burning down or whatnot, or any residue from the year before you're leaving over is going to basically create a mat as a weed barrier. So,
Okay.
a lot of times when we've talked about triticale or some wheats or barleys or whatnot, or anything that you mow down as just simply a cover crop that you mow over, will lay a mat down that you would plant into, and therefore stopping sunlight from causing a lot of weed pressure and a lot of early season weed growth.
Okay.
So that's one side of it.
Okay, but so you kind of switched there. We were talking no-till, and now you're talking cover crops.
Yeah, right.
Now, are those things synonymous?
It seems to be. I mean, I've kind of noticed that the guys who are no-tilling are usually into a cover crop method.
Okay.
And I think that I think it's becoming a program almost. It's more of a nutrient management program in the soil than it is an agricultural practice, I think.
Okay.
So, but even just guys who say do a soybean or a corn crop, the opportunity to have the residue from the year before sitting, and anytime you're kind of not really breaking up nutrients and allowing things to move throughout the soil, you're keeping a lot of nutrients right there in a no-till situation. And then obviously soil erosion. Anytime we're not losing any of the topsoil or any of the stuff, any of the important stuff, it's good. And I think in the past with tillage, there's always been this thought that if I till and I have a proper seed bed, I'll have good soil to seed contact and I'll have good early season growth. I think there's a mindset behind that, well, if I'm just planting into a no-till, I mean, I'm just it's just, whatever happens. If it has good soil to seed contact, I'll have germination, it'll grow. But if I work it over, I can guarantee that I have good soil to seed contact too.
Okay.
So
what are the disadvantages of no-till?
Of no-till?
Yeah.
It's tough for me. I don't think there are many disadvantages to no-till. I think that obviously there's a little bit of an equipment. Obviously you'd need a no-till planter and whatnot. There are a couple little changes you would have to make to your operation. It's kind of a change in mindset than it is anything else, trying to get past all of that. So, and I think that with no-till, a lot of guys who no-till are into crop rotation. So, like one bad side to no-till, in my personal opinion, is a guy who does corn-on-corn no-till.
Okay.
Because with corn-on-corn no-till, a lot of times you see significant leaf disease issues because leaf disease, the bacteria and things like that live in the soil, and they live over the winter in the soil depending on the temperatures that you have throughout the winter and late fall, early spring. And so when you don't till and you don't move that bacteria around, you don't give it an opportunity to be removed from the soil, and you don't use a crop rotation that will hinder leaf disease and things like that, you tend to see a lot more. So anthracnose stalk rot is one of the best examples. Without a proper crop rotation and in a no-till situation, it can actually thrive in a field of corn on corn.
Okay.
So
what about those guys who would say, if I use conventional tillage, I can get rid of weeds without having to use burn down or chemicals or anything? Is there any disadvantage of burn down, of having to spray herbicides, to kill that cover crop? I mean, is there any cost disadvantage for that?
yeah, one, there's obviously the money factor. I mean, you're adding more more inputs per acre when you're talking about a spray down, especially on a tillage program, because you've already spent money obviously on fuel. Fuel is a big deal, especially for the larger farms. I mean, you're talking about a lot of man hours, a lot of tractor time, for some of the bigger acre farms and whatnot, and then to have to go back in later and run a sprayer over top of it. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. And anytime, and you've broken up the soil, and then now you're moistening the soil, so you're almost creating a compaction issue year after year, and that's what we've seen a lot of times with tillage methods is compaction issues, where we've seen just soil that's just compounded every single year, and it becomes difficult to plant into. It becomes difficult for moisture to release itself throughout the soil. You see a lot of ponding and puddling issues and things like that. So it's just another downside.
Yeah, and it sounds to me it's kind of a perpetuating thing. If I start with this tillage and it takes me a little while to get over that compaction, even with cover crops and no-till. It's almost like I've got to keep tilling to break up that compaction.
Yep. When in essentially you're not.
Yeah.
You're not at all. You're making it worse every year. So, and I think there's almost a happy medium when you're kind of there are guys who just flip a switch and are like, well, I'm no-till now. I just want to do it this way. I think there's more of you need to work yourself. That's where the minimal till guys kind of work in. Like maybe not chisel plowing all the way down into the subsoil,
Right.
Maybe just kind of loosening up your topsoil before you plant and whatnot, and moving slowly into it year by year, instead of just, straight up no-till right now. And it's kind of a transitional thing, I think.
Makes sense. So I just, it seems to me, at least in this area, we see a lot of guys going more no-till and cover crop. Why do you think that is?
I think agronomists are getting in their head, but honestly, it's a soil nutrient thing. I mean, I can tell you time and time again, reading soil lab analysis and things like that. I can tell you guys who do proper crop rotations. I can tell you guys who are doing the right things to build organic matter. I mean, I showed you one a couple weeks ago. There was a guy in Minnesota who had an incredible organic matter number,
like 5%.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and the reason is his practice. It's actually a small little field that he really dedicates to doing plots and doing things like that. But he actually uses cow manure, and every time he has a fresh load of cow manure, it gets turned into the soil, and that's why his organic matter is so high. He also runs a cover crop in the winter. I mean, it's a 10-acre little plot that he does, but it's a perfect example of land management. Whether it's 10 acres or 10,000 acres, it's a perfect example of maximizing soil efficiency to get what he wants out of it. And he's made. I talked to his dealer before and said that he makes jokes about the guys all around him who just toss money into inputs, and his little 10-acre, and I understand it's just 10 acres, but can yield with anybody anywhere around him, no matter what they put in input wise. And all he's doing is turning manure over, running a crop rotation, and running a cover crop in the winter. Yeah. That's it. So,
and he's got really good soil.
And
he's got minimum inputs.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So speaking about minimum inputs and those kinds of things, we're going to have Jerry Hase come in as a guest. Jerry Hase is in charge of our MC Ag, where it's kind of a little bit of a division of Master's Choice where they sell some chemicals, they sell some seed here locally. They're doing some of our production down here, and so he's going to come in and he's going to talk about some of those things. Jerry, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
So tell us just a little bit about MC Ag, and then tell us a little bit about your role there.
Okay. We started MC Ag here probably about 2.5, 3 years ago in Ullen, Illinois. It's a sister company to Master's Choice, and MC stands for Master's Choice Ag, MC Ag. And we are a retail business there. We sell corn, soybeans, chemical. We do custom application. We do fungicides, foliars, all kinds of different applications as far as our custom rigs, and we also sell it to farmers that wants to apply their own, applications. But and we give recommendations on different levels, and that's beginning to be a lot of my job right there is to going out and meeting with farmers and giving recommendations and spending time with the guy,
Good.
you know, and just to let them know that we got their back, you know,
Good.
basically.
And so MC Ag was kind of birthed out of when we were doing production down here. We're still doing some production down here, some seed production.
Right.
And so we had all this equipment, we had all this time, you had all of this knowledge, and so we thought that maybe we could expand to be able to sell some stuff here regionally, locally, and then with all of this expertise.
Yes, and I mean it's been a very good business for us. I mean we've blossomed quite a bit here, and I mean we've acquired several growers and several you know, different lines of products that we're you know, doing other than just seed corn.
Yes.
I mean we're making more touches with the farmer.
Definitely.
They know that we're there for them, and they're being very responsive
Good.
with that.
Good. So we're kind of at a point here. I knew that y'all were spraying a lot. We've got a YouTube video, a burn down with Jordan, and y'all were spraying a lot then. Are the spray rigs still rolling now that corn is kind of up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're starting to do a fungicide. Well, we're supposed to start today, and it's raining here in Southern Illinois, but we're supposed to start today on a guy that's got 500 acres of corn that we was going to put a fungicide, insecticide, and foliar feeding on his corn at this time, and it's about 10 days away from tassel.
Okay, about 10 days away, so pre-tassel.
So are you kind of seeing a gap in growers as guys who, because as people have watched, you know, we had quite a bit of rain there a few weeks back.
Yeah.
Are you like kind of seeing a gap between the guys who were in the ground before the rain and the guys after? So the guys after the rain are obviously probably still, you know, doing their atrazine and their post-planting herbicides, and the guys who were in before the rain are actually looking at fungicide and insecticide because they're heading towards pollination.
Yep. Well, last Friday we sprayed a field that corn was probably about 2 or 3 leaf collars, and put the final post application of chemical on it.
Okay.
And then today, you know, we was going to start on a guy that's 10 days away from tassel.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
so
Yeah.
you know, so I mean, there's a wide variation there. And then we've already started doing a little bit of post spray on beans right now. So still doing a pre on some beans and burn down, but we did start this last week on a post on soybeans.
Wow. Interesting. So I want to just kind of mention foliar feeding for a second. You talked about that. How many guys are there? A lot of guys that are starting to look at the benefits of foliar feeding.
Yep, there's a lot of guys that's they're seeing the benefit from foliar. I mean, you're feeding the plant. You're not feeding the soil. You're feeding the plant. And the soil. I mean, we do a soil sample on most guys. I mean, there's a lot of guys that we don't get to do soil sampling on, but you know, we're shooting in the dark air. But I mean, it gives us an idea. It's a guidepost. A soil sample is. That's all it is. But we're seeing a trend to where guys are going more and more to a foliar application because they're realizing that the dry fertilizer that we put out there, that we can put out there year after year after year, it doesn't change our soil test. We're doing a foliar application. We're feeding the plant, and they're seeing that the benefits a big bump out of their yields that way.
Okay. So what kind of, what kind of things are we foliar feeding? I mean, are we foliar feeding nitrogen, NP and K? I mean, what are we foliar feeding?
Very little nitrogen
Okay.
in some of our stuff, and you know, mostly it's micronutrients and stuff like that. I mean, there's a long list of different things in our stuff, and there's some stuff that they don't mention. You know, they don't want to give all their secrets away.
Sure.
But there is it's a good combination, and we work with this company, and I don't know if we can say our companies that we deal with here, can we?
Yeah.
Ag Spectrum, and they've been around the business for 40 years now, and they've got a lot of research and development on their products, and it's been tested over and over again. So I mean, it's a product that I feel comfortable with.
Sure.
And there's a lot of products out on the market. There's a lot of good products out on the market, and I've just got acquainted with these guys, and their technical support is awesome to deal with, and just like a farmer, I mean, they've got my backside as well as I got the farmer's backside.
Good.
You know, we're trying to help each other.
Yeah,
you know.
definitely.
And-
You can always mention who we're working with. So there's no problem with that. Problem with that.
But you know, and like I say, we're feeding the plants, and that's the main thing. And you talked about fungicide a while ago. I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer anymore, especially with the weather conditions that we have. Seems like we've had wet seasons every spring for the last 4 or 5 years. And fungicides will pay year in and year out. You could put it on a crop for five years consistently, and I can guarantee you 4 out of the 5 will pay your benefits
Nice.
out of that.
So when do they need to be applying fungicide?
Well, they need to be scouting their fields for one thing, and make sure that when there is a first sign of any kind of a disease out there, I would apply fungicide. I mean, naturally, the bigger your plant gets, the more contact that you make with that plant, the more benefit that you're going to get on it. But there could be you could have a disease early in the season, and you need to apply. And we've got some fungicides that's it's economical, and then you've got some that's a high dollar.
So I'm gonna see if Kyle knows his stuff here.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna lead into this question. All right. Is there a time that you should not, a period that you should not be applying fungicides?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Because a lot of your fungicides has an oil base in it.
All right.
And if you apply it during pollination, you will kill that pollen.
Okay.
Point Kyle.
Kyle. So this
Almost
means
word for word said that.
Yeah,
earlier.
absolutely, he did. So we'll take his fungicide recommendation, but we will not take his barbecue restaurant recommendations anymore. Okay, because we deducted points for that, but that's
only one of those knowledges pays my bills. So let's go with that one.
Exactly.
But there is some fungicides out on the market that's not an oil base.
Okay.
It's a water base, and you can get by with it. But studies has proven that you're better to leave it alone.
Just better to leave it alone.
Yeah,
wait till after.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Try to get it before
or after.
Wait till after.
Yep.
That makes good sense. So we talked about fungicides. We talked about foliar feeding. What other chemicals are you seeing a really good benefit from?
Insecticide.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's a no-brainer to me. I mean, if you're making a pass across the field with a fungicide or anything like it, throw insecticide in.
Okay.
I mean, I had a guy last year just put insecticide in on his beans and got a 10-bushel bump.
Wow.
I mean, he did a side-by-side comparison, and that's a kind of a no-brainer there too,
No doubt.
And so, I mean, you can spray some insecticides for as cheap as $1.50 an acre. And
well, you get 10 bushel bump, man. You've increased that by tenfold almost.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's very, very beneficial to.
Okay.
I think leaf disease is a little easier to scout than insect pressure also, and that's why guys kind of lack on the insecticide at times. I mean, you can walk 10 feet into your field and say, yeah, I've got northern, and it's an issue. But you got to really be looking for a lot of the insects and whatnot, especially when you start getting towards, maturing grain and things like that. I think that's why guys seem to, and there's so many insect traits on the market, guys seem to rely heavily on that. I mean, if they've got an above ground protection, there's no reason to spray insecticide.
At least that's what they think.
Just start saying that's false.
Yeah. So.
Because, I mean, unless they've got a Smart Stack or a Vipterra or something like that, they're still going to get, Japanese beetles or whatever, clipping their silks, and then that causes issues where earworms will come in and different things like that. So, I mean, Vipterra will control earworm, or Smart Stack will, but it controls it. But you still will get a feeding off of it.
Still will get a feeding off of it. So spray those. Good. Jerry, we really appreciate you coming in today, sitting down with us, kind of talking through these. Man, we got some good advice there. So appreciate you doing that.
You're more than welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate it.
So at this time, we're going to call in Matt Corzine. Matt's going to talk to us about crop insurance, how that kind of works, how guys need to get it, how they need to use it, and those kinds of things. So we're going to have him. On the line right now. So on the line with us now is Matt Corzine. So Matt, thanks for joining us. Matt, give us your job title and your job description.
Okay. Basically, agent is what I would call. My job's to be a liaison, basically, between the client and the company that we sell for.
Well, good. Okay. So you're selling crop insurance. So I guess one of the big questions is, why should a producer invest in crop insurance?
Well, basically, costs and trying to figure out, that's one of the few inputs that you can control the price on these days. So that's one of the main things we push is that. And if you don't have insurance, you could lose everything you have basically with the way prices are these days. So I kind of use the thing, you wouldn't not insure your house if you think you're not going to have a fire this year, basically.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense. So the question is then, okay, so a guy says, yeah, this makes sense for me to get crop insurance. How does he know? Maybe he's even got some, but how does he know that he has enough? I mean, are there any formulas, variables there? How does he know that he's got enough crop insurance?
Well, usually what we recommend is trying to at least cover what your expenses are.
Okay.
If you know what your expenses are, then you can look at the different levels of coverage we have and try and match it up according to that.
Okay. And those different levels of coverage, are they like per field, per crop? I mean, how do how does this kind of thing lay out? I mean, does he go, okay, I'm going to just cover this field, or I'm going to cover all of my corn, or I'm going to cover all of my soybeans? I mean, how does a guy go about, doing insurance? If I get homeowners insurance, I know that covers my house, but what about what about the contents of my house? So I mean, how does he go about doing that? How does he insure a crop?
Okay, well, you have to insure the entire crop for the county. You can't just insure it field by field.
Okay.
So, but you could do it by crop. If you wanted to insure your corn, you could do that, and not your beans. That's fine too.
Okay. And now, is there going to be a price difference if I mean, can I just blanket do my whole farm, or?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just wondering. I mean, can I just say I just want to cover my whole farm, or do I cover like all of the expenses for just the farm, or how do some of those things work?
Yeah, there's different types of policies. They do have what they call a whole farm policy, and then you can also do certain, just different by crop policies. The whole farm policies are something we don't deal with a whole lot. There's a lot involved. It involves, getting your taxes involved and everything else, because it has to do with if you have cattle or anything else. It's including all of that.
Okay.
So all of your expenses are considered in a policy like that.
Okay.
But the crop policies is mostly what we deal with, and like I said, it's based on what your history is how you start.
Okay, your yield history or your expense history?
Your yield history.
Okay, and so you start with kind of, this is what I typically yield, and I'm going to insure my crop in case it doesn't yield this much. Is that kind of the premise there?
Yeah, basically you would, if I sit down with you, you're gonna give me your history of what all you have. I mean, it could be up to 15 years, whatever you have.
Okay.
And they'll average that, and then that's what your what they call an APH, an actual production history. And that's what you start with, and then according to that history, you can take a level anywhere from 50 up to 85%. And that's where you're getting your guarantee for what we're guaranteeing you, at least bushel wise.
Okay. So let's say I take let's say my history on corn is 150 bushels, and I'm going to say, okay, I'll do 50% of that. I'll say if I, so that would be 75 bushel is what I would be insuring for, a guarantee of 75 bushel. So what happens if I get 25 bushel? Do I only get the insurance policy for 50? I mean, how does that claim kind of work there?
Yeah, you basically exactly right. If you're guaranteeing yourself 75 bushel, and at production time you only made 25, the insurance would cover the other 50 bushels that you were short.
Okay. So how do I kind of go about knowing if I need to put in a claim? I mean, so let's just say I went for the 85 and I get, I don't even know what that number would be, but say I get, I harvest 80% of what I typically do, but I'm insured to 85. Would it pay me? Would it be beneficial for me to go ahead and claim to get that extra 5%? Does that make sense?
Would it be beneficial? I mean, the way I think so, yeah. I mean, if you're short what you're guaranteed, then I would definitely do it.
Okay.
I mean, you're paying the premium for it. That's if you get any kind of loss, we like, that kind of separates us from other types of insurance that don't want to pay a claim. You know, and with crop insurance, if you've got a claim, they want to pay it.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. I didn't know if there were any rules that said, if you were at a certain level, so that makes good sense. Good. So I have a question concerning kind of master's choice. A lot of our guys are, raise corn silage. Can they insure corn silage?
There's certain counties in Illinois that you can actually just get insurance for silage, and the counties that don't offer that, you can request with the RMA if a written agreement to insure it as silage. But generally, what we do in this area is the guy just insure it as a grain crop, and when you cut it for silage, what they would do, they come out and they'll do an appraisal on it. And then whatever that silage appraises at is what they'll use against your guarantee. If there is no, loss on it, then that's how they would get the production, is just by their appraisal. But if it did have a loss, again, the appraisal would tell them, well, he's 50 bushels short of what he's guaranteed, and that's where your claim would come in.
Okay. So
you can't necessarily just insure it as silage. You would insure it as a grain crop, but if you do chop it for silage, that's how they would come across with it.
Okay, that makes sense. So they would go out and say, so if I insured it for 85%, they would go out and say, well, this crop was going to make 85%, so there's no claim there. So that does make sense. So what about some of these guys, Matt? What about some of these guys who would have, maybe they are livestock guys. They have corn silage, but they're going to go back in with right after that corn silage, they're going to go back in with a crop that they're going to harvest for more forage. Say it's a triticale or a rye or something like that they're going to harvest in the spring before they put another crop on. Can they insure both of those crops?
No, not necessarily. Like the only kind of a double crop situation we have is, say, if you were to plant wheat, and if you plant soybeans after it or milo after it, then you can insure those.
Okay.
But like the kind of the cover stuff, they don't really insure that, the rye and all that.
Okay. But you can insure. So if I go corn, I can insure the corn, and then if I plant wheat, I can insure the wheat, and then if I go double crop beans after that, I can actually insure all three of those crops.
Yes.
Good deal. Good. Matt, are there any other tips or hints or anything like that you would give producers about crop insurance?
Yeah, I would. Well, I would say definitely keep very detailed records. It's kind of a pain in the butt to do that when you're busy out trying to work, but it helps with claims, and it just helps, in the long run if you ever had any kind of review or anything like that. And as far as coverage-wise, a lot of guys will try, it's going to be a good year, I'm going to lower my coverage, or it's going to be a bad year, I'm going to raise it way up. We would generally recommend find some place in the middle and stay there. You may not have a claim for 3 or 4 years, but then that 5th year you might have a huge claim. So it's going to kind of even out in the long run.
Okay, good. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Good. Matt, we appreciate you calling in and letting us pick your brain on these questions. And so we appreciate that. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Matt. Take care.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Kyle, thanks for coming in today. And we appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped on us today. And I'm glad that Jerry confirmed that you do know something.
Yep.
And so even though you may not know anything about barbecue. So anyway, hey, guys out there, we appreciate you listening to us. We had a good time today. Hope that you enjoyed it. Always remember that we are social: YouTube, Facebook, and of course our MC podcast. Thanks for joining us today.